services. We have been focusing like a laser beam on immigration enforcement. The states and locals have a key role to play in assisting the Trump administration in making good on this important mandate that they received from voters in November. We've been doing this, fighting Biden's policies for 4 years, and doing that in ways that have been effective, but also recognizing that we didn't have a partner in Washington who actually wanted to see good policies come to fruition. Now, we did not waste any time following the inauguration of President Trump. In January, the state of Florida signed a memorandum of understanding between the Florida Highway Patrol and Immigration and Customs Enforcement to help facilitate continued partnership to fight illegal immigration and trafficking on our state's highways. We were one of the first states in the nation to enter into what's called a 287G agreement with the Department of Homeland Security through our Florida Highway Patrol, and you've already seen fruits of that with operations that are consistent and ongoing and that have taken great action to protect this state and its people from illegal immigration. And of course, here last Thursday, we signed legislation that makes Florida the strongest state in the nation for state and local cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. This legislation will require state and locals to assist the administration in Washington with reestablishing the rule of law, with removing illegal aliens from our communities, and from protecting public safety. And that is a duty that's imposed that also has potential sanctions and accountability measures to make sure that they are meeting their obligations under the law. So we have set the standard for other states to follow. I think you're going to see more states do that in the ensuing weeks and months. And we didn't waste any time. As part of the legislation, there is about $250 million that is set aside for grants to local law enforcement entities to assist them with these new duties that they have under law. And as part of that, overseeing that is the cabinet, sitting as the State Board of Immigration Enforcement. We signed the legislation on Thursday. We met Monday on a federal holiday to have an emergency meeting of the Florida cabinet. We were able to appoint Larry Keefe to be the executive director, and we have authorized Larry to engage in emergency rulemaking so that we're able to implement the criteria that will be used for the distribution of these grants. And that's something that's really, really significant. And so right out of the gate, that's happening, and you're going to see that work very, very well. Which brings me to today's announcement. So we signed the legislation Thursday. We brought the cabinet together on Monday. And then here today on Wednesday, we are continuing at the state level to charge full speed ahead to deliver on what the voters sent us here to do. So as the new administration took office, I instructed state law enforcement agencies to work with the Federal Department of Homeland Security to execute agreements similar to the agreements that we have seen with Florida Highway Patrol. And I'm happy to say that they have successfully done that. We also can report that under the direction of Commissioner Simpson at the Florida Department of Agriculture, that the Florida Department of Agriculture law enforcement has also reached a memorandum of understanding to assist with operations from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So these are similar agreements to what Florida Highway Patrol entered into with ICE last week. FHP followed through on that, of course, and they have a full 287G agreement. This is the way that you're doing. Our state law enforcement officers will now be able to fully cooperate with U.S. Homeland Security authorities via this 287G program. Now, this is something that's been in law, I think, since the 1990s. It lay dormant under the Biden administration. This was not something that they supported, and it was something that they actively worked to subvert. And so if you wanted to do full 287G, they didn't provide the training or any of the resources that would be necessary to be able to do this. So now the 287G is being revived. We have the ability to receive delegation for our state and local law enforcement officers to perform specified immigration officer functions under the agency's direction and oversight. It also allows ICE enforcement and removal operations to partner with state and local enforcement agencies to identify and remove already incarcerated criminal aliens who are eligible for removal before they are re-released into the community. And we had problems with that under the Biden administration, where people would just be simply released rather than have ICE pick them up. This agreement will give FDLE, FWC, Florida State Guard, and the Florida Department of Agriculture expanded power and authority to interrogate any suspected alien or person believed to be an alien as to their right to be in the United States. And of course, with the legislation we signed on Thursday, it is unlawful to enter the state of Florida as an illegal alien. And that is a law that we are going to enforce, and we believe ultimately, I know it'll get challenged, but we believe that the Supreme Court is going to reevaluate some of its prior precedents and uphold that statute. If they're found to be in violation of proper immigration status, we will make sure that they are held accountable. So this has very important authorities. It allows us to be able to work seamlessly across our state agencies with federal immigration authorities. You are going to see more effective interior enforcement when you have the state and local and the federal government on the same page. They don't have enough resources after 4 years of atrophy under the Biden administration to meet the numbers that were promised. And so in the intervening period in particular, if state and locals aren't part of the solution, then the problem is going to persist. So Florida's leading the way. We now have FHP with 287G agreements, and we also now have our State Guard, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and FWC. FWC reported, I think this morning, that, and they caught it on video. You have these illegal aliens, they're on top of a building, and they're dumping debris into this canal in Broward County. And I'm thinking to myself, what kind of behavior is that? You come in, you don't even have a right to be here, and then you're dumping all this stuff into our waterways. And so they were detained. They're now in custody of DHS, and they're going to be returned to their country of origin, which is appropriate, and other measures that need to be taken to respond to that, are being undertaken as well. So this is something that, to be just doing that in the open, it's like, I think it's just emboldened because you had 4 years where you could basically do whatever you wanted and the federal government wasn't going to hold you accountable. But those days are over. We're here in Florida. We want to be part of the solution. We're leading, and I really appreciate everybody that's been involved in doing this. We had the legislation signed Thursday. I talked to the 3 cabinet members. At that time, would-be member, I don't think James had even been sworn in yet as Attorney General. Talked to Commissioner Simpson, CFO Petronas, and I'm like, we got to move quick. And they were like, absolutely, let's do it. And so we did that on the holiday on Monday over in Niceville in the Panhandle, which was really, really good. We're going to finalize everything that needs to be done on the State Immigration Board at our next cabinet meeting. So we'll be soliciting input from the Law Enforcement Council. They're going to provide recommendations that we'll synthesize and utilize, to the extent it's appropriate and the extent that we agree with that. And then we're going to be off to the races. So this is something that I don't think there's any state that's even in the ballpark of doing what Florida's done so far. So I appreciate the members of the Florida Cabinet from leaning in, and I thank the head of the agencies, Agriculture, Law Enforcement, FDLE, State Guard, Roger Young at Fish and Wildlife, and of course, Dave Kerner. We've had this agreement executed now with FHP. We're leaning in. We're working really hard. We're not sitting on our hands. There's things when you're in positions, there's things you have to do, and you got to do it. And if you don't do it, you could be judged harshly. But there's other things that you don't really need to do. I mean, we could just say this is the federal government's problem and let them do it. And if they don't do it, but that's not what we're doing. we realize this is a problem for everybody in terms of how this impacts. You know, we could have just turned a blind eye when we see illegals dumping stuff into the canal. That's not the appropriate thing to do. Without having the legislation, though, you could have potentially done that. But that's not how we roll here. We want to be part of the solution. We understand this may be our last chance to solve this problem once and for all. So all the state agencies are on board. We're ready to roll. We are rolling. We have been rolling with operations over these last few weeks, and we're going to continue to amp up those efforts.